all for being here this Saturday and discuss some issues with us. So the talk is about integrating ethical, legal, and social aspects into common procedure models. And we talk about IT procedure models. That's the reason why I think, or we think, that's fitting for that conference. To motivate why we should think about ethical, legal, and social questions, you could check your own organizations if there are some ethical guidelines. I've copied the ethical guidelines from the German Information Society, but I know that other societies like the IEEE or some others have nearly identical or at least the same quality of ethical guidelines. So as typical informatics, we are organized in some kind of societies, and I guess we should all have somehow of ethics guidelines to follow. But how we could do that and how we integrate it in our daily business or in our daily work, I will present in the following outline. First of all, I discuss if ELSA, so ethical, legal, and social aspects, are any special compared to other requirements, or if ELSA is just another requirement like a functional requirement or like IT security or something like that. After that, I want to describe one special ELSA recognizing procedure model. After that, I describe some of our well-known IT procedure models for our IT projects and discuss if ELSA is already integrated. And after that, I would bring up 4 theses for further development. So first of all, is ELSA special, or is it just like any other requirements? So normal requirements are typically in the company interest or in the project interest. So you could collect these normal requirements by interviewing the company or discussing about the company interests. So again, some requirements like the customer satisfaction would be in company interest too. But I think ELSA is not in that category because ELSA come from and are shaped. Because ELSA come from and are shaped by the society. Just a moment. So I hope it works now. And for that reason, that are different to company objectives. For example, on ethical and social aspects, the process of discussing these aspects are still going on, and we don't have a finished agreement or a finished decision about any ethical and social questions. And even for law, it's not clear how a specific law would fit into your case. So maybe you have to wait for some court to discuss that. And ELSA changes over time. Normal requirements change over time too, but I guess the tracking is more difficult because the effect is coming from outside your company or outside your project team. So if ELSA is different to other requirements, maybe there should be a special way to discuss ELSA. And for example, there's the IEEE Standard 7000 from 2021 as one example. This IEEE standard is, compared to other standards, relatively new and isn't a new version of an old standard, but the first version from the IEEE discussing ethical standards for projects or an ethical procedure to discuss that. And the standard shall enable organizations to incorporate ethical issues and concerns from the outset in the development of systems. So I copied you the 2 links of the IEEE standard. If you like, you could visit them. The idea of the standard, the aim of the standard is that you can design systems that takes into account individual and social, ethical, as well as technical values. And so it's not only about the ethical values, but about the technical values as well. The idea is to create a balance between these two areas. And the management constraints like time and budget as well. So on the ethical values, you could think about transparency, sustainability, data protection, fairness, responsibility, and a lot of others. And on the technical side, you could think about efficiency and many others as well. The standard is applicable to a lot of projects, and the primary support is that organizations are supported in identify stakeholder values and in bring these values in the development of a value-based system or service. They say that the IEEE standard match all type of products and services and even every life cycle phase of a product. So, for example, in the existing system with ethical challenges, the IEEE standard could be used to repeat value-based analysis, even if the product is on the market as now. The standard support the organizations to do that in the following areas: transparent communication between the different participants, for example, about ethical decisions, and the understanding and anticipating of the values that implicate consequences of the systems. And by selecting of system design alternatives. So the idea is that you have a control of the long-term value-oriented sustainability of a system, not only of the short-term effects, but about the long terms. So the IEEE standard therefore describes a procedure model that enables organizations to do that. Of course, the standard does not solve all problems. Some limitations of the standard are that there is no definition of the values for a specific system. The idea of the IEEE standard is that they describe a procedure model to discuss it, but they do not give you the ethical values you should respect. They describe how you could find them. So therefore, they do not describe whether something is ethical or unethical. That's the decision in the procedure model or the decision you have to take. And another limitation would be more problematic. Not all human values or aesthetic features are integrated. So it's only focusing on ethical values. You have to deal with other human factors, like, for example, user experience as an aesthetic feature as well with another model. And the IEEE standard is not giving any ethical guideline for the organization itself. It's only giving it for one project. They are doing it by describing 3 ethical theories that can be used by yourself to identify ethical values. I just linked the 3 theories for time constraints. I would not go too deep in that theories. The general idea is that you have some leading questions, for example, like what are the possible personal values, maxims that should be prevented or promoted by the respective system that you could answer and could help you to find the ethical values and then follow the consequences and the duties. The IEEE 7000 standard describe some key areas of the procedure model. So they distinguish a concept research phase and the development phase, and have 5 areas of activities, 2 only in the concept research phase, 2 mainly in the development phase, and 1 in both phases about the transparency management. In the concept research phase, the first activity group is about development of concepts and to get a research about the context of development process and to get an understanding about your technical project idea. After that, now some kind of highlighted, you identify ethical values and you set priorities because not all values would be realizable at the same time. After you have defined the values and get a common understanding about the values in your organization or in your project organization, you have an activity group, a process for defining ethical requirements. So you take the values into account and define concrete ethical requirements. And after that, you have an ethical risk-based design process. So it's some activities described to do that in a well-fitting way. I want to look deeper in one of the key areas, the identifying of ethical values, and describe you it in an image that is in the standard existing as well. So you build a value cluster. So you search for basic values like, for example, transparency or data protection or things like that. And from the basic value, you are searching the concrete values. If we stay at data privacy, for example, we could look at the sovereignty of the persons, and we could, as one value, and we could look at as another value about the sovereignty of companies. And then you could search for value demonstrators, so you could discuss how the values could fit into your project. So it's leaded by values, and if you have the values, you could demonstrate them into your project by ethical requirements and translate these ethical requirements into risk-based design. And after that, you have a system that is value preserving for your selected values. So that's the idea of the IEEE 7000. And the question is, must we run the IEEE 7000 each time when we do an IT project as an own procedure model? Or could we integrate, or should we integrate the IEEE 7000 or any other ethical framework in our procedure models? So typically we have activities, roles, processes, language, tools, and artifacts in our procedure models, and we use them to develop systems. In these common IT projects, procedure models, no concrete element is structured for integrating ELSA. So the integration of ELSA or the respect of ELSA depends on other factors, like on the humans that are describing it. One point of view is that ELSA requirements are considered as non-functional requirements as any other non-functional requirements. And the tracking is then like any other requirements. Even in agile projects that would fit, because the definition of ready, the quality metrics about a requirement could be designed in that way that the coordination of new requirements can be included in a quality condition. But it doesn't give any structured support to the individuals. What other models do, for example, the V-ModellXT, is that they are describing in some sections that are called values and guidelines, for example, that they should be user-friendly and they should integrate not only guidelines, but give you a tool set for that as well. Saying that at the same time, they don't give you a rule book or tool set for consideration of ELSA aspects. V-ModellXT is quite old. Maybe newer one are giving their more support. Let's look about the manifest for the agile software development. The manifest was built to describe the common understanding about agile software development from different agile software development models. They formulate 4 values and 12 principles, and 2 of the values maybe would give us some understanding about ELSA in their projects. For example, that the signatures of the manifest believe that individuals and interactions are more valuable than processes and tools. So you could see that they concentrate on persons, but if you take a deeper look at these persons, you could see that the human-centered approach is focusing on customers, subject matter experts, users, and developers, so not about other end users, for example. Other affected parties for the technologies are not explicitly mentioned in the agile models. If you take a look at other standards that are quite common, for example, the PM book guide, they have their own ethical guideline with the 4 values: responsibility, respect, fairness, and honesty. And they have an ethical decision-making framework, but both are an appendix on the standard and are not included in the standard. So it depends on the project managers if they use it or not, and it's not integrated in the procedure model as concrete elements. The same is in the IPMA individual competence baseline for project managers. They all say it's a required competence to align the project with the formal culture and values of the organization, but they don't give any tool set for doing that, caused by the ethical guidelines are only an appendix. And we could learn some key facts from another research discipline, the business ethics. They focus on business models instead of technology design, but I guess there are some transferable approaches. For example, in the broader field of consideration of information ethics, but I guess concrete integration of ELSA in progress models is also possible. And one example could be the shaping between institutional and individual responsibility. So if we now share the understanding that ELSA must be discussed in IT projects and is not included in the procedure models we typically use, maybe we should discuss if that's okay, or if we should fit some ELSA aspects into these models. So for thesis about that, in my understanding, the awareness of ELSA as a social framework alone is not enough. It's not enough to tell IT project managers or developers that there's a social framework with ethical, legal, and social aspects, and they should integrate it, because if you only have these information for them, they have no standard way of considering it in the project, and at least maybe they don't have the time for that because they have to follow a procedure model and don't have any activities for that. So maybe the existing elements are enough. I think the existing elements in the procedure models are not enough for ELSA. because ELSA is too different comparable to other requirements to be considered in an identical way in the procedure models. So you should integrate it in activities, roles, and things like that, but it's too special to integrate it in existing ones. So I suggest that it's necessary to integrate ELSA in a standard operation procedure model, for example, by quality gates with ethical checks, or for the involvement of the affected parties, such as employees or things like that. And I suggest that the project should build a value register as one step of the procedure model. But I also think that even that would not be enough, because there are some activities beyond an individual project. For example, an organization should have a board or a forum to discuss their values and to get a common understanding of their own values. That would be in one organization. If you have projects with more than one organization, so cross-organizational projects, you should have a discussion about your common values with the other organization. And if you think about the professional groups that are involved in the project, like IT developers or things like that, the education and the training about integrating ELSA should be getting more complex, or should be getting more time. To conclude, even in the future, if we have integrated into procedure models, persons that are responsible for different levels of action must take into account ELSA criteria, and it would be interesting to do it in a more systematic way and to get some academic supervision about it, to get an understanding how to change the models. I guess that's a long-term challenge. One acknowledgement: the project, the results are from the project CARL, project about artificial intelligence for work and learning in the Karlsruhe region, technology region in Germany. You find the project website there, and we have a Twitter account. On the project website, we have English information as well. And we have some minutes left for exchange and discussion. If you have questions, feel free to ask.